The Karun claimed the frozen highlands of Iliain, a planet so harsh that most species refused to land. Black stone jutted through razor ice, and the river veil cut the wasteland like a moving blade, glacier-fed near freezing, and fast enough to swallow anything that slipped. The Galactic Council chose this place for a summit with the Karun Dominion. Neutral ground. Ara Mercer, one of 3 human cultural liaisons, watched both camps stare each other down across the snow. The Karun were nearly 8 feet tall, wrapped in obsidian fur and dense muscle. Famous across a dozen systems for one simple truth, predators against every expectation. The talks were working. 3 days of tension had softened into careful respect. Ara had learned the rhythm of their pauses, the meaning behind ear flicks and stillness, the way an elder's silence could be agreement without surrender. When a Karun listened without interrupting, it meant you were being weighed as something real. Near sunset, Ara sat outside the council tent, scrolling treaty clauses on her datapad. Borders, corridors, non-aggression when a scream cut through. The camp. Not an adult roar. I sharp panicked. Ara snapped toward the river. Downstream, maybe 50 meters away, a small figure thrashed in the rapids. Golden brown fur, barely larger than a human child. A cub. He had slipped from the bank, and the current was dragging him under and spitting him back up like the river was deciding whether to keep him. On the far side, adult Karun surged to the edge, roaring in fury and fear. They were terrifyingly fast on land, but the nearest safe crossing was far away, and the river between them was death. Beyond the rapids, Ara heard the growing thunder of a waterfall. Voices shouted behind her, warnings in human tongues, commands in Karun gutturals. Ara dropped the datapad into the snow and ran. Fax tried to stop her. Humans weren't built for glacial water. Cold shock could seize her lungs. Iliain wasn't Earth's. A sensible part of her mind pictured her body going rigid, pictured the river taking 2 lives instead of 1. Another part of her mind saw only a child being pulled toward the sound of falling water. She kicked off her boots and dove. The cold hit like a hammer. Her breath vanished. The current grabbed her and threw her downstream. For a heartbeat she couldn't move, panic flashing bright enough to drown thought. She forced herself to exhale, then inhale through the pain, and angled with the flow instead of fighting it. One hard kick, then another. The cub surfaced once, eyes wide, then vanished again. Ara lunged, fingers scraping fur. She caught him and held him against her chest. He was heavier than he looked, muscled and instinct-tanned. His claws bit into her shoulder as he clung. Blood feathered through the water. The waterfall's roar swelled. Too close. Ara spotted a jagged rock outcropping that split the current. Behind it, a thin pocket of calmer water. A chance measured in seconds. She kicked sideways, fighting the river until her legs burned and her lungs screamed. The current tried to twist them apart. The cub's weight dragged at her center. Cold crept deeper, slowing her thoughts, whispering the sensible thing. Let go. Humans didn't survive by being sensible. Her hand struck stone. She grabbed, slipped, grabbed again. The river yanked at her like a predator at a snare. Ara wrapped one leg around the outcropping and locked herself in place with shaking muscle. Then, with her free arm, she shoved the cub upward. Up, she rasped. Up. He scrambled onto the rock, coughing and shaking, but alive. Ara tried to follow. Her arms wouldn't answer. She could feel her body shutting down in stages, the river pounding her ribs with icy force. A shadow fell over her. A massive hand closed around her wrist, careful, controlled. Another hand took her other arm. In one coordinated pull, Karun's strength lifted her from the river and dragged her onto the bank. Ara collapsed onto the ice, shaking violently. Someone wrapped blankets around her. A medic's scanner hummed against her neck, and heat was pressed to her chest. Her lips were blue. Her shoulders stung where the cub's claws had torn skin. The cub's pair knelt beside her, bigger than the others. Fur darker eyes locked on the cub like a vow. When the parent spoke, the translator carried the weight of it. He saved my child. A pause. You are soft. You are weak. The water should have killed you. Another pause, sharper. Why did you jump? Ara's teeth chattered, but she forced the words out because he was drowning. The parent stared, as if trying to fit that answer into a shape that made sense. Then the cub pushed forward and pressed his small face against Ara's hand. A deep purr rolled through him, gratitude without language. The parent's shoulders eased by a fraction. For a moment, both camps stood frozen, not from cold, but shock. Council soldiers lowered rifles they'd been clutching for days. Karun hunters who had bared fangs in meetings kept their claws sheathed. The river roared on, indifferent, yet the space between predator and prey shifted. Ara lay shaking on the ice and felt something had been decided. That night, 3 elders came to Ara's medical tent. They brought gifts that diplomats would later celebrate: rare medals, carved stone, ceremonial cords, but they spoke of something rarer. We believed humans were weak, Elder Thryka rumbled. Prey animals playing at politics. We were wrong. Ara managed a tired smile. We are weak, she admitted. We're slow, we're soft, and we can't handle cold water. She swallowed. But that's never stopped us before. Thryka's gaze sharpened. No, he said. You are not weak. Then what am I? Ara asked. The elder leaned in, voice heavy as winter. Willing. You risk death for someone smaller than you, Thryka said. You jump even when it makes no sense. That is not weakness. That is something we did not understand. He held her gaze. And it is more dangerous than strength, because it cannot be frightened away. The treaty was signed the next morning. Historians would later credit strategy, economics, mutual advantage, but those who stood beside the river vale knew the truth. The alliance began the moment a human saw a child drowning and jumped without a second thought. Not because humans were the strongest, because they were the ones who would choose to care, even when the universe insisted it would cost them. And on a world of ice and stone, the galaxy learned to fear that kind of courage.